Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. You're listening to the Passionately Wrong podcast. Most people spend their days sleepwalking through life, at least in the sense that they make decisions quickly on incomplete information. In fact, this intuitive decision making is both necessary and appropriate to survive our challenging world. But problems arise when we do it on big topics too: what to eat, how to stay fit, how to make a living, to say nothing of society's big decisions: climate change, national debt, discrimination, and more.
Yeah, that's right, James. I think that we've come to find out that not everyone thinks clearly or decides well. We've all encountered people who are passionate advocates for their issues and just as passionately wrong. Why are there suddenly so many dangerous idiots? Together, we'll map out where the pitfalls lie and learn how to make better decisions.
I think focusing on better decisions really is the way to go. And one way to do that is to consult many information sources and challenge your assumptions. That's where you and I come in. We want to be your decision-making Sherpas. What do a Special Forces Army Ranger, that's you, and an S&P 500 General Counsel, that's me, have in common? We'll discuss the surprising similarities on the show, but you can start with this. It's our deep commitment to not being wrong. Whether the consequences of a wrong decision are losing money, going to jail, or literally life and death, we made careers out of being right when it counts. So today, I think we wanted to start with this topic. How much does hard work help you achieve success? Does hard work guarantee success? If so, why? And if not, why not? Why do we want to start with hard work? I think it's because a lot of people are doing a lot of hard work and wondering why they're not getting ahead. Maybe we could start with a little bit of background here, Randy. What did it take for you to get into the military and succeed early on in the military? Was it something you had with you when you walked in the door? Was it your work ethic? How much did hard work play a role in your success early on in your career?
I think that's a really good concept, James, that being, working hard all the time, giving your best, I guess is a better way the way I would put it is doing your best all the time kind of comes back, at least in my experience and for what I can see around me, it comes back and rewards you in the end. People, if I hadn't gone to college, even though I didn't do as well as I could have before I joined the Army, but if I hadn't gone to college and hadn't actually earned those credits, and in reality, it was a lot of the credits I earned in high school. If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have gotten promoted as fast because college credits are looked at as promotion points. And then if I hadn't done, there wasn't internet back then, but I didn't go into the Army and go, oh, they're just gonna get me fit. I was like, hey, I should probably be fit before I show up, and so I did a lot of hard work to when I got to the gates to join the Army. I was already kind of ahead of everyone else because everyone else just like, if I join the Army, kind of like stripes, like I'll join the Army and they'll get me in shape, give me a haircut and get me in shape. I just figured it would be more beneficial for the Army and myself if I was already in shape when I got to the Army. So I think doing your best all the time within limits too, because obviously if you're dedicating 24 hours to something, that's not very healthy, in my opinion. You need to take a break for, if nothing else, for peace of mind and do things that you enjoy. Because if you don't enjoy things in your life, then, life's not too fun. So obviously you want to go through life and have kind of a good balance.
Let me pick up on some things I heard you say there, Randy. And the first one was a distinction you drew between hard work and doing your best. Those are really important because you can measure work by your own standards or by other people's standards. Certainly the one that you can never fool yourself about is whether you've done the best job that you could under the circumstances. What will look like hard work to somebody else might not seem like a big deal to you, but you will know whether you've put in your best effort or not. So I like that distinction. The second thing I think I heard you say, which I also like, is the work you put in now might have payoffs at a later time. And so you can consider it a little bit like an investment. Sometimes there's an immediate reward. You do the thing, you get the payoff. Oftentimes, though, the hard work that we're talking about that will contribute to long-term success is actually building a foundation for something. Like college credits helped you get promoted more quickly, like paying attention to fitness helped you get started off before you joined the military, helped you start off on the right foot. So did I accurately capture what you said at the beginning of your remarks, that doing hard work means, your own personal best standards, and that there's an element of immediate rewards and later rewards?
Yeah, and by all means, you've said you liked both my topics, but if you don't like anything I say, let me know. Okay.
There is something I want to comment on as well, but I wanted to start with what we agree upon. Not to worry.
Yeah, that's basically what I said, which, I know there's more to the topic than that, but that's what I wanted to start out with. Because I think also when you start out in your career, you don't know what the parameters are that people are judging you by because you don't have the experience. So you do the best you can, ask for guidance when you can, and then you move through life and you get more experience and you understand the parameters that are expected of you.
I might try to summarize that one in this way. Sort of our foundational principle is, if you have the attitude of wanting to do your best for yourself, that's going to get you off on a good foot.
Good
so
start.
that personal attitude is really important. And the second one is, it's probably useful to give up the hope, and I would say even the illusion, that good things are going to come your way without effort. Good things require, luck plays a role, and we'll come to luck later. But really, if you have a good attitude about doing your best, and you have a realistic attitude, let me say, about, good stuff comes to those who really work for it. Those are good attitudes that you will bring to any situation. Don't assume you're going to get something for nothing. Yeah. All right. So,
but in your experience, as in the legal world, and also throughout your college, you went to college for a hell of a long time to get there, is hard work, does hard work guarantee success, or is it a good indication that you will succeed, or are there just so many other elements? It's a 10% and there's 90% else out there of other things.
So you talked about doing your best, which you qualified by meaning within limits. And so that for you partly meant you got to enjoy what you're doing. I would draw a slight distinction there and not disagree with you so much as say, sometimes I would work hard on things I didn't enjoy, but which I knew would be productive to later results that I was working towards. And specifically, when I'm talking about school, whether it's college or then law school, sometimes I had to work to read a stupid case book to get ready for an exam that was a precondition to passing the course. And it wasn't something I necessarily enjoyed, but I could see that it was useful, productive time. So think of that as a barrier to entry. If you want to pass your college courses, you're going to have to get a good enough grade on the test, right? And so whether you like it or not, that is an appropriate thing to work on if you've set yourself the goal of achieving that qualification. So the way I would say, answer the question about, is hard work enough? Will that guarantee your success? My answer is almost always no. It is a necessary but not sufficient condition. A lot of times you just have to put in the hard work, but doing so is certainly not going to guarantee your success. And maybe exploring the reasons why people who work hard are not successful would help us tease that out. You must have known people who worked their ass off, but didn't perform as well ultimately. What were some of the reasons you thought that people didn't perform as well, didn't succeed?
So I think there's a couple of different points there. One is being adaptable. One is being, an attitude. And then there is a certain level of, I don't know if it's cognizant or intelligence, where you have to realize that what you think is doing your best isn't acceptable in the environment you're in. And I'll just talk briefly about those things. So in the military, when you're in there as an enlisted person, as a private, most of your supervisors are going to expect a certain level of initiative. And if you're not used to showing that initiative, you have to really kind of focus on it. Like if someone asks, like, hey, I need someone to do this, and you don't volunteer because you're like, you don't want to do it, because no one wants to take the trash out. No one wants to go lift a bunch of stuff out of a truck, right? But they're actually trying to train you that you're a team and everyone should be helping everyone out. So it shouldn't be one, I need someone to go unload this truck. It shouldn't be, Randy going, hey, I'll do it. It should be everyone going, hey, let's go get it done, And so that's a training thing, but they're also trying to, but I think this goes over to even later on in my career as I went up in rank and responsibility. It was, hey, at some point, people realized that I volunteered for everything. I volunteered my team for everything, just about. And I used a lot of it as a training thing, because sometimes when you volunteer for stuff, at least in the military, it's a learning environment. You're going to learn something new. And maybe I already know it, but my team doesn't. And so therefore, by making my team more aware of these skills or what's going on, they're going to be better. They're going to be a better team in the end. When I move on to another job, I'll leave them with that behind. I think a lot of people take offense when they think they're doing the best they can, and it's not reaching the results that the supervisors want. And then the supervisor's like, hey, okay, this isn't working. Let's try it this way. They may disagree, but instead of, allowing the supervisor, who probably has more experience, maybe, more knowledge and education, to lead the way and show them this method, then they take offense to it. I've had a lot of people in the military. The problem, I don't think it's a problem, but I think it's a big difference between civilian world and the military world, especially the military enlisted world. You never know in the enlisted military what the background of anyone is, unless you research it or ask them, right? But you could have a guy or a girl with a doctorate as a private, because that's what they chose to do for whatever reason. And they could be the smartest person in the room. They could be an expert in what you're doing, in fact, and you've just been trained in a military school for 4 months, but they spent three years researching it. I mean, it doesn't happen, super often, but I've met people that I outranked by a lot that had 2 or 3 master's degrees. And for whatever reason, they decided to go in instead of an officer. They decided to go in as an enlisted guy. And you can't underestimate anyone. The variety of people in the military is crazy sometimes. And so but as a result, they're not smart in the military. They're smart in something. And they just naturally assume, because they have degrees, that they're smarter than everyone in the room. But they don't have an experience in the task you're doing, or, the attack you're about to conduct, because they didn't get that training. And so I've read books by enlisted people who had degrees, who hated the military and got out and thought everyone was stupid because they didn't do it their way. But I thought that was just ignorance on their behalf. No matter how intelligent or educated they were, they didn't understand that the environment, they weren't trained to be in that environment. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, working hard doesn't mean you're progressing towards where the group wants to go. And being open to other ideas, being open to also acknowledging the authority. I mean, there's a hierarchy in just about everything you're doing, and acknowledging that authority and the possibility even that those people know what they're doing because they've been in the industry that longer than you. They've been doing this a lot longer than you have, and that they might have something to add before you express your opinion that, hey, I'm the smartest guy in the room, you guys should listen to me. I think that's really important. I don't know if I spilled over into too much stuff there.
No, it's a good description. And I would like to maybe summarize briefly what I understood and maybe relate it then to the business world, because there's more overlaps than I realized in what I'm hearing you describe, Randy. I like it. I didn't answer fully your question before, and maybe we can come back to it. You're asking about what were some of the success factors in college. Is it just hard work? Is it intelligence? I want to stick, I'll come back to that maybe if it's still interesting, but I want to, stick with what you talked about. I love those 3 words: adaptable, attitude, intelligence, or, environment specific skills. I do see similarities from what you're describing in the military to success in the business world. Uh, the attitude here is not the attitude we talked about before in the sense of your personal sense of always doing the best. You talked about it in terms of showing initiative and volunteering. That will drive a huge amount of forward progress in your business career as well. Businesses need people to volunteer just as much as the military does, and they want people to raise their hand and say, yeah, I'll work on that. It might not be the thing that you had in mind. It might be the equivalent of emptying the truck or doing the dishes or taking out the garbage. There's tons of such projects in the business world, but you're becoming known as a person who will volunteer to help the company do projects like that will definitely be an attitude that you wish to cultivate. Adaptable in the sense of you need to perform in context. There's always a context. In the business world, that means there's always a history. We're here for a reason. It didn't just pop up out of nowhere. There are also always constraints. Maybe it's time, maybe it's resources, maybe it's resistance you're going to get from somebody else. And so I completely echo what I heard you saying, which is that you can be super smart and qualified technically on paper, but utterly fail at helping advance the objective because you don't know how to do it in the context that you're in. And that context is both situation specific, culture specific, and people specific. We have hierarchies, maybe not quite as black and white as the military, but sure, there's bosses and people who ultimately make the decision. I've seen the most surprising failures happen from the most smart people, not because they didn't have a good idea and a way to genuinely move a project forward, but because it didn't fit our culture and where we were at that moment in time. And those kinds of people who know they know the right answer, but can't find a way to implement it in the setting we're in, those are some of the most frustrating failures, right? You think, oh, this person has so much potential. They have such great ideas. Why can't they just simply learn? They can't insult the boss, or, they can't call everyone stupid. That doesn't work, right? So success in the context of, your attitude, first of all, your adaptability to the situation, and then applying your intelligence in a situation specific way. Those are, I think, really good additions to the discussion about, is hard work alone enough? And I think we've already realized, no, it's certainly not. You need to take it and apply it to the correct things at the correct time in the correct way. That's something I believe you can learn, by the way. This is not inbred traits. So to maybe close the loop on your earlier question about success in university, a certain amount of intelligence goes a long way. Yes, you do need to be able to read quickly, to analyze stuff, to process information, certainly as you go on in law school and other advanced degrees. And analytical and intellectual mindset will help you a lot. But so I don't think we should underestimate that, right? If you're not literate, you're not going to be a successful lawyer. If you're not willing to spend hours and hours reading and writing, you're also not going to be a successful lawyer, just to pick that one profession. But it's not enough by virtue of what happens with the knowledge and information that you gain. So yeah, I think the element of tactics and applying your ability is where the learning comes in. So you're going to have whatever intelligence you have by nature, and then how do you make the most of what you have? That, if I had to pick just one thing out of what you've described, I would have said it was the volunteering that I saw brought people the most far, by just being open to saying, yes, I will try that. I don't know how it's going to help me, but yes, I'm going to show myself willing. That attitude, I thought, contributed most to people's success, because you learn.
Right. No, I think by, volunteering and being a part of the team and productive, I think that's a big one. I think the second one is communication, because the people, the supervisors and the people who are managing you, they have their own visions of what they want you to do, or what they're asking you to do. And if you don't ask the right questions, if you don't a lot of people, I think, are afraid to show weakness by asking things they don't know. But if you don't know what his vision is, if you don't know some piece of knowledge that's important to get the task done, then how are you going to do the task well? And how are you going to work hard on the task in the right direction? Going back to the question of the day. So, working hard in the right direction, if that's a thing, then I think that's really important, because you can work all as hard as you want, but if you've accomplished nothing of the vision of the people in charge of you or the company, then what's the point of that? You're just going to be known as the guy that works really hard for no reason.
That's probably the most important distinction that I would also emphasize for why hard work doesn't make you a hero, or hard work won't guarantee your success. It's that, and this is where people, you talked before about, they get frustrated when their results aren't recognized, or rather their effort isn't recognized. Good intentions doesn't mean a thing. Doesn't matter how hard you work if you aren't achieving the goals that are ultimately set. So that's working on the right things in the right direction. I fully echo that. I like the element of communication that you're bringing in, which starts with listening and asking questions. I can't tell you, even well along in my career, how many times someone would come in and ask me for something, and it would have been the easiest thing in the world to just give them what they asked for. Like, fine, here's the contract, or here's this thing that you asked for. It took me years to learn that I got much better outcomes for me and for them by not giving them immediately what they wanted before I asked them a couple simple questions. Well, why do you want that? And what are you trying to achieve? And, sometimes what they thought they needed wasn't at all what they needed, but I only found that out after asking them to make sure that I understood. In this case, it wasn't understanding to help me do my job better. I knew how to do my job. It was more understanding what they actually needed before I ran off and started doing stuff. So enthusiasm and wanting to get started is great, but it helps really, really to make sure that you're oriented towards a common goal before you go running off.
I think the military has very specific requirements for a version of communication by your evaluation reports. You have to have an initial counseling within 30 days of taking a new job. Your new supervisor has to sit down and say, these are the expectations. And you have an opportunity, a one-on-one opportunity to go, okay, I don't understand. So if I wanted to, the evaluation reports change over the years, but when I was doing it, there was like 5 specific areas that they graded you on, and they gave you a rating of like 1 to 4, and they had words for them, but it's basically 1 to 4, 4 being the highest, let's say. That's not the way, it's not rated on a number system. It's rated on, excellent, good, substandard or something like that. But let's just call it the 4 number system, 4 being the highest. So if I got a bad counseling, just because the guy wasn't very articulate, doesn't make him a bad person. I'd say, okay, let's say I wanted to get an excellent in physical fitness. What would you, if I did this, if I, got this high score on a PT test and I did this, and this, would you give me an excellent? He's like, and then if he said no, then I said, what's your requirements? And then I said, if I want to get an excellent in, and I go down each of the 5 things, in my mind, if I do this, this, and this, then I would get an excellent. Do you agree? And I was very specific, and it took me a while to do that. I didn't do that initially because I didn't understand what was going on. But later on, after I had couple miscommunications of what he thought excellent in a certain area was and what I thought excellent is an area. So when I got my evaluation report at the end of the year, which we got annually, I would look at it, I was like, why didn't I get an excellent in this? And he's like, well, because I don't think you met these standards. It's like, well, I did this, this, and this. It's like, that doesn't mean excellent to me. I was like, okay, so now then I learned that. And as a leader too, later on, I became very specific. I'm like, hey, for instance, if you did this, this, and this, you get an excellent. And at the end of the year, I'm like, okay, here's your evaluation report. Why did you get an excellent? I was like, well, did you do this, this, and this? And like, well, my peers got excellent. I was like, well, maybe they did that, and that. I don't know, because I don't know who's rating your peers, but this was my thing. So it goes back to communication. And so all your hard work goes in the right direction. Talking to your supervisors, if they're going to be doing, even if they don't do official on paper evaluation reports, in their mind, they're doing them, right? So you're like, if I wanted to work at the next level in this industry or this company, what would you expect for me to be a candidate for promotion? Things like that, I guess, in the outside the military, because most of the time your supervisor in the military does not control your promotion. He controls your evaluation report, which is a part of the promotion process, but it's not, he doesn't recommend you for promotion. There's a board up in DC that's going to make that decision most of the time.
I'm detecting a theme in the advice and information that you're providing, Randy, which is you seem to have been pretty good at understanding and figuring out the environments you were in and the systems that you were in. And partly by virtue of making mistakes and bumping your head against the wall a few times, but then you seem to have learned to be a good observer of, well, how does this system work? You're not judging it necessarily to say this is stupid or I hate it. You're just saying, how do I succeed in this particular environment? So it's related to the prior point of understanding the system you're in, the environment you're in, and being adaptable and using the tools of communication. In this case, it sounds like the military system of sitting you down for this expectation discussion within the first 30 days is really helpful to the people who are listening. Probably a bunch of people have that meeting and get nothing from it, right? But you did.
That's right.
Because
Absolutely.
you said, hey, wait, this is how the system works. We have a similar concept in the legal world when it comes to contracting, and a similar concept generally in business, but in the legal world, you try to achieve a meeting of the minds. And that's a fancy way of saying, do you both have the same understanding of whatever it is you're trying to contract about? That's really actually harder to do than most people realize. To have two different people be able to write down and understand the same thing, it's not trivial. So it's worth spending some time listening and asking questions and thinking about, well, do I really understand the same thing as this person does? Certainly, if your supervisor is evaluating you, it's worth making sure you understand what he or she thinks. The second element in business, what you're describing to me about, how do you make sure you understand what your supervisor wants and then deliver what they want, is what I understood always as the phrase expectation management. So if I want my boss to be happy with what I'm doing, they have to understand why I'm doing it, and I have to understand what they want me to do. It's a little bit, again, trying to achieve that meeting of the minds. But again, for me, it comes back down to what's in your own head, how hard you're working, how deeply you care about it, how good your intentions are. It's interesting, but frankly, it's also irrelevant unless the other person also has the same understanding of, well, that's a good goal, that's the right thing to work towards, and I agree that's the right way to measure it. So,
And I think that's the same so we've been talking, at least I have, talking mostly about supervisors and people working under supervisors, but it's the same thing with clients, right? You can work as hard as you want, but if you're giving something to your client that your client didn't expect, then you've missed the boat, and you're not going to get you're not going to get the advantages, the positive feedback that you want. You have to be very clear.
Yes, 100% agree. And I have to be honest, as someone who took the ability to work hard a bit as a competitive advantage, I can, knuckle down and work 100-hour weeks if I have to. It was an adjustment for me and a shock. And one of my learning experiences that hard work is by no means enough if you haven't got that alignment. If you aren't delivering what your client wants, what your boss wants, then you're wasting your effort. And so that takes us back to one of the earlier points is you've got to work on the right things in the right direction for your work to count. So yeah, if you have the ability to work hard, great, but it doesn't count for anything unless you've got alignment in terms of the goal. So I think we had a similar experience here, a similar learning. So communication, I wanted to come back to something you said about showing weakness, because I think it's an interesting way to describe it. But go ahead, were you going to say something else?
I'm going to take my glasses off because it's reflecting weird. So what no, I forgot because I was going to take my glasses off. Go ahead.
No, all right. So I liked how you described the element of asking questions to communicate better as a little bit overcoming the fear that you're showing weakness. And it's true, certainly as you advance in your career, you are expected to know what you're talking about and to be competent, and doesn't saying, hey, I'm not sure I understand, let me ask a question, doesn't that reveal a weakness? Maybe, but actually the results are so positive. I found when you do that, people are so happy to be able to explain again, okay, here's what I mean. They're also so happy at the idea that you're actually listening, that it more than outweighs any concern they have about your competence, because they figure, all right, Randy or James, they're really listening to me. They're taking this seriously. They're trying to figure out what I want. That builds in a way their trust that you're going to then go off and do what they want, in a way that when you are listening to someone and you don't ask a single question, well, that could mean you understand it perfectly the first time through, but it also very likely means, well, you weren't curious enough. When I got more senior and I had teams of lawyers to manage and I would hand out assignments, I had a very visceral reaction to how people interacted with me. Some people took notes and asked questions. Other people didn't say a word. They didn't take a note. And I'm like, how are they remembering what I'm asking? How are they going to go off and implement what I'm doing? I had a strong bias towards wanting to drive communication. And it was more than me just talking. It was about the person doing exactly what you said, asking questions, showing curiosity, making sure they understood. So I found that it influenced my perception of a person's performance even before they started, whether they were curious enough to ask questions about what we were talking about.
And then all the hard work and communication you can work your way to success to a certain point, but then a lot of this stuff becomes relationships after that, especially at the higher levels, does the guy above you want to work with you, or does he want to work with the guy that goes and drinks with them? Or, I don't know how it works in the business world, but in the military, as the higher you get up, it's at least in my community, and my community is not the norm in the Army, but in the special operations community, it's very small and everyone knows each other. So these people are going to be influential, if for no other reason than they're going to select who's going to get a commanding position next. They're going to recommend. And by giving you certain positions on your way up the ladder, by having that experience, you're set up for a higher position later on. I don't know if that makes sense. And I guess I could talk about it. So there's these positions called first sergeants, where you're in charge of a company as an enlisted guy. There's only so many out there. In most cases, if you don't ever have a first sergeant position, it's unlikely that you'll make sergeant major, because the first sergeant position is an administrative position, requires a lot of you to know a lot of administrative functions. And if you serve it's weird, and most people don't know this, but a first sergeant and a master sergeant actually make the same pay. They're the same exact rank. It's just one is an administrative and one's a more of a it's usually a staff person, but he's not considered in charge of people. He may be supervising him, but he doesn't usually do he doesn't do reprimands and things like that. And he's not in charge of like logistics for the whole company and things like that. So if you don't take that admin position, then it's harder. It's not impossible, because they still need to fill the sergeant major positions. And if they're not enough first sergeants, they won't be able to do that. But someone can recommend you to take a first sergeant position because they think you have what it takes to go higher. And like I said, there's only so many of those positions. So then you already have a leg up on your peers if you do that. And like, for instance, no one ever offered that to me. In fact, I had a job locked in that I was going to really enjoy, that I applied for, and I beat everyone else out for. And somebody else had a job that he wanted, but somewhere along the line, his senior guys said, "Hey, that job's not going to set you up for promotion. We want you to be a first sergeant. So we're going to take you away from this job that you wanted to do and put you in this really hard administrative job. But now that you move over here, this thing's open, and the job that Randy wanted isn't as important as this one. We have to fill that. So we're going to move Randy to this other job that you wanted that he doesn't want, and not let him do what he wanted to do." So it's just this kind of favoritism, for lack of a better word, or maybe not even favoritism, but just looking at someone and saying that guy has what it takes to be a leader, in my opinion, because it is just the opinion of the guy who's recommending him for that slot. And so that's when we go back to saying, does hard work guarantee success? And looking at all these factors, there's always obviously the factors of, favoritism, people seeing, capability within you, because if you haven't shown your best foot forward the whole time for whatever reason, they may not look at you as a favorable candidate for a higher position or a supervisor position or something like that.
So I think it's clear we can dispel the guarantee element of this discussion. There
Yeah.
aren't guarantees, and this will be true in a lot of life and a lot of the topics we talk about. Not everything is in your control. And that doesn't mean, though, that you should throw up your hands and say, well, what am I doing this for? Because the things that we are talking about today and in general are, how do you increase your chances of success? How do you put the odds in your favor? And there's lots of ways that you can, as Napoleon said, I prefer my generals to be lucky. Well, you want luck to work in your favor, and that's what we're talking about. So
But you
some
can
of the
make your
stuff
own luck.
exactly, you can help increase your odds. And we talked about the importance of your attitude. You volunteer, you be helpful, then you work on the right things so you be effective. I think also, when it comes to these social factors you're talking about, what makes a person more likely to recommend you or to apply that favoritism, if you want, in your favor? There's things that you should not do, right? So there's enablers and there's derailers. So the enablers, we just talked about several of them. The derailers are things like, don't be a jerk, don't be selfish, don't complain too much. It's easy to complain. There's so many situations in the work that we do where there's an unfairness, somebody gets ahead and they shouldn't have gotten ahead. It's tempting like crazy to complain about that and let it get to you. It's helpful not to, though. It's helpful to put that aside and be, I think the best way to summarize it is be someone that people like to work with, be someone that people like to be around. And then they're more likely to want you to be on their teams. They're more likely to want to see you succeed. They're more likely to help you succeed. And that's a combination of both positive and negative things.
I have two things to add. One is I've heard a lot of, and this doesn't happen too much in the military, I don't think, but a lot of if we talk about gender and women saying that they weren't getting promoted because they weren't in the boys club and they didn't get invited to drinks and things like that. And I don't know how true that is nowadays or before. But I don't think it's gender specific, because there's favoritism. And maybe at that time when they were looking in, there was all boys that were invited to that. But I mean, I often didn't get invited. Well, I don't own a motorcycle, for instance. And there was a lot of people in the, for lack of a better word, the chosen boy thing that owned motorcycles. So they would go on motorcycle rides together, which obviously I didn't go on. And so they had these conversations on these motorcycle rides about work that I never was involved in. And then they would get the first sergeant job or something like that, because they had a better relationship with the people at the higher levels. And so I don't know what I was trying to say, except that, it's not always misogynistic or racist that people are not inviting you in the groups, because it happens internally just it happens. People just favor people sometimes. And I think it can be racist and misogynistic, but not always. And then go ahead. You want to say something on that? I have one other example to give you.
Yeah, no, I just want to say I have observed the same phenomenon, that part of being likable is having common interests. And then people, when they have common interests, they do stuff together. I also have a group of colleagues at work I went motorcycle riding with, and I had a running group that was open to anyone. And the only requirement was they were interested in running. And we had men there, we had women there. And then we would go for a run and we'd have lunch together. And inevitably, work stuff comes up and you think differently about the people that you spend time with like that. So rather than complaining about the unfairness of the world, you can also say, I observe that this mechanism works, and are there things I have in common with this person that I see is instrumental to my future, and can I find a way to leverage it? You won't have an overlap with everything, but there might be some stuff. Here's a simple tip. I paid attention to the books and magazines and newspapers that I saw the senior executives reading. So if nothing else, I'd be able to say, oh, did you see that article in the Harvard Business Review about X? And that was a simple point of interest that I created, not because I cared about it, but because I knew that my boss read it. If that sounds like sucking up, it's not. It's really just making sure that you're enhancing your odds of having good luck happen to you, right? That's how I viewed to look at it. Other people might have said I was a suck up, but okay.
Well, I have we may talk about this later, but you and I grew up in Europe and we didn't have an affinity to sports. And I don't know how that affected you in Tufts. I assume Tufts had some sports teams and you're like, I'm not going to the basketball game. Who cares? I don't know how you felt. I felt that way when I went to college. I was like, why? I don't care if they win or not. Why do I care? It doesn't make any difference to me. And I don't know anything about American football or American baseball or hockey. I don't know anything about any of it. And I never went to a game, or maybe I did. And I was like, why am I here for 3 hours? It doesn't make a difference to me. And I didn't grow up with sports, but I was in the military, in the American military, and America cares about sports. And this was often a point of contest between me and my peers and my supervisors when they were trying to get rapport with their, with their team or squad or platoon, and like, hey, what sport, Randy? And I'm like, yeah, I don't like sports. And so then I kind of shut them down instead of I could have changed my mind a little bit and changed my attitude a little bit, but I was pretty from the beginning. For the first 10 years, I was like, I hate sports. I don't want to talk about them. And that was that. The thing that popped up on that too is sometimes for physical training, we'd play basketball. It's like the supervisor was like, we're all playing basketball. I was like, I don't know how to play basketball. And they're like, well, yeah, whatever. I was like, no, not only do I not know how to play basketball, I don't really want to learn, because I think it's a stupid sport. I think people get injured very easily, and that's not very effective to the Army mission. And I'd rather just run. He's like, you're going to play basketball. It builds cohesion. All right. So we play basketball. And of course, I don't know how to play basketball. So I grab the ball and I dribble once every 4 times I step or whatever. And they're like, oh, that's double dribbling. He's like, I told you I didn't know how to play basketball. And then, or football or whatever stupid sport they want me to play. I was like, I don't know how to play the sport. And it's no fun for me because I have no skills in this sport. So when people are dribbling around me because they've been playing it their whole life, all I want to do is smack them. And so that was, that kind of goes in with, you trying to suck up. I did the opposite, and it affected me adversely because I could have had a better attitude about it. Hey, if you teach me how to play the sport, I'll try. Not too hard because I don't want to get hurt, but go ahead.
Well, it's a good story, and I'm glad we had a positive one and a negative one. For me, I learned that you don't need to have a perfect overlap with people to have rapport. You just have to have even one thing. So after I started running, I was halfway through my career. I came to running late. People knew that about me because I was a very avid runner, and they always had a point of conversation with me. It might not have been about soccer or basketball or whatever was going on, but they said, oh, how's the running going? So you don't need too much to start to develop a little bit of that connection. You don't need to antagonize people by telling them that their activity is
your sports suck. But
you said before you had a second point.
Yeah. So this might be interesting to you guys. So I think it's important just to know that you can work as hard as you want. You can try to build the relationships. You can suck up James style, or you can not suck up Randy style, however you want to do it, right? But there might be a point where you realize that it doesn't matter what you do because of this environment, whether it's toxic or it's just not something that's jiving with you, that you're just not going to go forward after a certain point. And you got to make some hard decisions about maybe you need to change jobs or leave the company or something like that. I'll give you an example. I went to war in Afghanistan. My vision of success was to bring all my guys home, try to make Afghanistan a safer place. And those are like my 2 priorities. The people in charge of me, their version of success was how many kills I had on the enemy. when I went, the last time I went, we were there for 9 months. I had 0 kills, but I went on 60, 70 missions. I captured, 80 guys, but without a shot fired, or a couple shots fired, but no one killed, no one hurt. And so to me, I was like super successful. I was like, I'm capturing bad guys. I'm sending them back up to be questioned. I haven't, none of my guys are wounded or killed. I'm making Afghanistan safer by getting these guys off the street. And to me, that was super successful. To unbeknownst to me, because I didn't get the feedback till I got away from the area I was. I had to get back to the main base and back to the States. It was they were kind of making fun of my teams. Like, they go in missions, but they don't get in firefights. What's up? I was like, why shouldn't we avoid firefights? Why do we have to, if we can capture them without them fighting, isn't that the best thing? But that's not the way they saw it. And this is the way the war worked during a specific part of it. That's the way that people saw the war. And then later on, their mentality changed for a variety of reasons. And it also depended on who's in charge of you and what they were emphasizing and things like that. But that's, once I realized that, for me, it wasn't so much that, I wasn't going to be put in a position to make my promotion easier because they didn't think I was the combat fighter that they wanted, because I didn't get in firefights. I didn't look for firefights. I ended up switching out and doing something else that didn't relate to that. But that ended up happening because in the military, you only stay in that job for 3 or 4 years and then you move. So, and that's why I moved. But I don't think that would have influenced me if I had been like a new person in charge there at that position. It wouldn't influence me to leave that position, because I still thought I was doing the best for my men there, which is different than kind of maybe your job in the business. I don't know if you guys have that affinity for the people underneath you, where you want to protect them from the people above you, and you'll stick on a job you hate for that. But anyways, I wanted to use that as kind of as an example to always be prepared that, either you're going to have to just come to terms and say, you know what, this isn't the environment where I'm going to be CEO, where I'm going to get promoted above where I am because of the way everything works, and I'm not willing to do something that they want me to do. And maybe I need to move on, or am I just happy here until I retire? Something kind of like that.
The phrase that comes to mind, ironically enough, is pick your battles. No, sometimes you're in a situation where you are unlikely to succeed in the manner that you wish. Even if you do everything according to what we just talked about, it's still just not right for you. My first work out of law school was in private practice, working for law firms, doing, high-powered corporate work. Wretched, abysmal environment in the sense of long hours, boring work, highly paid, but a bit soul-sucking.
Defending She-Hulk. That's what I kind of envisioned doing.
And, if the conditions aren't right, sometimes the best thing you can do is, rather than changing the conditions, just change your setting. You get out of there yourself and put yourself in a setting that is better suited to what you want to do. So that's, I think, a helpful addition to the discussion, that, if you're reading the room correctly, if you're reading the situation, sometimes the best thing you can do is not try to change it, but to get out of it, and not even work with it, just to, get out of it.
All right.
Okay, so we probably have got a good amount of information for our listeners today about what is the importance of hard work, what is the relevance of it to your success, and any final thoughts that we would like to leave people with.
No, I think hard work has a big piece to being successful. There's no guarantees. And there's no guarantees because people are involved, right? There's people above you that think one way, and it's not always the same way that you think. And I think the big piece is to be successful is to work hard. And one of the things you mentioned before, when I was talking about balance, is not that you don't have to knuckle down for 3 days in a row for, do 100-hour days or whatever. that's required sometimes to work hard to get things done on timelines and stuff. But also I would say you also have to, but eventually you're gonna burn out. So you need to recognize that and balance your time. So I think working hard in combination with the proper attitude and communication on all levels between higher, lower clients, peers, having that communication, I think is really almost, I would almost say it's more important than hard work in some cases, because otherwise you'll be doing hard work in the wrong direction, like we talked about.
Right. So maybe the ultimate takeaway is your success when you're doing endeavors with other people is measured in part by them. So you need to make sure that you've got alignment with other people about what are going to be contributors to your success.
Sounds good.
I like that, Randy. Thanks for listening, everybody.
We'll see you next time.
We'd love to hear what you think. Please comment on the show and share your thoughts. We read all the comments.
And thanks for joining us, and thanks for subscribing. See you next time.